Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Tom Nelson, and this is the Diabetes Control video lesson series, 6 Steps to Gaining Complete Control Over Diabetes. This is lesson number 3, part 2, How Your Body Uses Glucose. So what happens to the glucose after it enters the bloodstream? As stated, the glucose is absorbed by capillary blood vessels in your intestines, and it's transported via the hepatic vessels straight to the liver. Nowhere else. Glucose, like any other food item, must be managed. It has to be controlled, especially while it's in your bloodstream. There are special organs located directly in the center of your brain. It's called the hypothalamus. It's a very small organ. It's about the size of the index finger on your fingernail of your index finger. This is a picture of the brain, and you'll see the blue area in the center that's circled. That is where the hypothalamus is located. And again, you can see it's not very large. I call the hypothalamus the control room because it has 25,000 wires that are coming into it, and those wires are actually nerves, are coming in from sensors located in virtually every part of your body. And it is as if there were a room with 25,000 computer monitors in it. Each monitor is connected to one of those wires, those nerves, and it's constantly displaying all the changes that are taking place wherever it's occurring in your body. Next to each monitor is a chart, and that chart is your set points. Those set points are the upper and lower limits that are set by nature for your body. They're put there at birth, and they should stay there all of your life, although they do change because of external pressures throughout our life. So each of those set points is going to give the little guy that runs that control room the limits that each of those sensors is allowed to go to, and then he will make corrections. It's very much like this, except 25,000 of them would be much, much larger. This control process is called homeostasis. It's your body's way of keeping you alive. It keeps every different type of condition in your body within limits that will keep you alive and keep you healthy. It monitors and controls your body's temperature, your pH, that's the acidity, sodium and fluid levels, which are very important. We'll talk about that in a future video. Blood pressure, and many others. It controls your heartbeat, your breathing, the blinking of your eyes, and much, much more. So you don't even have to think about it. It's done automatically. Plus thousands of other functions. So your glucose, your blood sugar, the level of it is one of those 25,000 monitored functions. Imagine, again, that this little man is constantly watching all of these monitors, and he's making changes as necessary to maintain those bodily functions within those set points that I talked about. So your body is under a relentless pressure to change. The temperature outside your body is mostly lower than your body's temperature. Your body's temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and very rarely is the temperature outside of your body at that height or hotter. Usually it's cooler. So every time you eat, many changes take place, and many functions have to be started, managed, and shut down. First, the little guy in your control room has to initiate hunger pains to get you to eat, to remind you that it's time to eat. And then he initiates the digestive process and then shuts it all down when the food is all digested and absorbed. Now the real challenge begins. He knows that excess glucose and excess insulin cannot be left in the bloodstream for a very long period of time. It will cause serious damage. So your body's set points for glucose are set by nature between 80 milligrams per deciliter and 100 milligrams per deciliter. That's as read on your glucose meter. So what's going to surprise you is that it only takes 4 grams of glucose to raise your blood sugar from 0 to 80, and another gram, just one more, to raise your blood sugar to 100 milligrams per deciliter. So that's only about a teaspoon of glucose. That's about the size of a cube of sugar. It can damage your vessels and tissues if it's left in there too long at elevated levels. So that damage is going to begin right around 100 milligrams per deciliter when insulin is present. By 110 milligrams, it's causing cumulative damage. And the higher it goes, the worse it gets, the more damage that's going to be done. So as soon as you begin eating, there's hormones in your intestines. They're called amylin and incretin, and they send messages to your control room indicating how much insulin is going to be needed to get the glucose out of the stream once it gets there. So the man in the control room will send a message to the pancreas to start producing and releasing insulin to get the glucose out of the bloodstream as quickly as possible. Then, when the blood sugar drops, he's going to shut the insulin production down, and he's going to start the process of managing your blood sugar level, if he can. So in the last videos, you learned about how all of the cells in your body have that insulin receptor that it attracts, captures, and passes one molecule of insulin through that cell membrane, and then that triggers the gate that opens, and it allows that one molecule of glucose to enter the cell. So it doesn't take very long, if you're healthy and everything is working properly, for your body's 37 trillion cells to pull the excess glucose and insulin out of the bloodstream. So there's specialized enzymes that are in your brain and your pancreas and a couple of other places. It's called the GK enzyme, the glucokinase enzyme. And that constantly monitors every minuscule change that takes place in your blood sugar, and it reports that to that little man in your control room. It's highly sensitive. It can sense and report even minuscule changes in your blood sugar. So then the man in the control room is going to vigorously seek to minimize the elevated glucose levels in order to minimize damage. So Mother Nature ingeniously designed your body to minimize that damage. We eat 3 times a day. We eat enough to carry us for a number of hours in between the meals. And so that you have to eat enough to maintain your body between those meals, but something has to be done with that excess glucose in the meantime. So Mother Nature equipped your body with 3 glucose storage tanks. The first one, and that's the main one, is your liver. And everything, again, digested, goes directly to your liver, like we said in the last videos. And some of it is converted into glycogen, that very compact form of glucose. Your liver is capable of taking up to 100 grams of glucose out of your bloodstream and converting it into glucose or glycogen and storing it. But rarely does it ever take that much, because the little man in the control room maintains a certain level of glycogen in storage in your cells. That's for fight or flight danger situations. So then your liver is going to release the balance into the main bloodstream, where it's going to travel throughout your body. Then that's where the second glucose storage tank is located. It's actually your skeletal muscle cells, and they are larger, so they can convert up to 400 grams of glucose. By larger, I mean you have far more muscle tissue than you do liver. So those 400 grams of glucose are going to be taken up by the cells and converted into that glycogen again, and then stored in the warehouses in their cells until they're needed to produce energy. So the first 2 storage tanks are not going to uptake 500 grams of glucose, as this might suggest, for the same reason. The little man in the control room usually tries to maintain about a 60% level of glycogen in storage, so that you have something there in the event that you come face to face with a grizzly bear and you need to either fight or run. And so that glycogen could very quickly be converted into energy to provide for that. So the only time that glycogen stores go lower is during, say, a marathon or an Ironman competition, when you push your body to the limit. And then you could possibly even run those storage tanks to empty, which means hitting the wall, where you literally run out of gas because there's no fuel to produce energy for you to continue. So if you've eaten the right kind of food, low glycemic index, things like vegetables and a little bit of fruit, and you've eaten the right amount, which should be about as much as your clenched fist, because that's the size of your stomach. And so once all your cells have uptaken as much glucose and converted it into glycogen as it possibly can, there should only be about 4 to 5 grams of glucose left in the bloodstream, which means that you will be within that 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliter as maintained by the little guy in your control room with those set points. So if you've eaten too much or you've eaten the wrong things, you're going to upset this whole process. Most adults eat up to 3 times what they actually need every single day. So the balance will be converted into fat. When you have excess glucose in your bloodstream and your cells have stuffed themselves full, where they have no more capacity to store any additional glucose, then it's going to remain in your bloodstream. And that's when the little guy in your control room has to take charge. He's going to instruct your pancreas to dump additional amounts of insulin into the bloodstream. And then your liver and that excess insulin are going to convert all of that excess glucose into triglycerides and put it into the bloodstream. That's a process called de novo lipogenesis. And so the insulin will stuff most of those triglycerides into your fat cells. Some of that is going to be converted into LDL cholesterol and put into your bloodstream. But those fat cells are your third fat storage or glucose storage tank. And those are unlimited. You fill that tank to its brim, your body's just going to produce new and more of those fat cells so that you can store even more. So what's not converted into glycogen and stored is converted again into the fat, and it's stored in your belly area because your liver has vessels that run directly to the fat cells in your belly area. And so it can quickly add or subtract from that as needed. So it's up to you as to how much of what you eat becomes fat. So now proceed to lesson number 3, part number 3 of 3, and that's going to be your challenge. You're going to incorporate all of what you've just learned and try to make a difference in your life. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and please pay it forward. Share what you learned with other diabetics. Thank you.